talking about the challenge, some of their examples, how you engage in certain aspect of it, so they can actually see it as something that's
one is more about the how they're getting there. There's an assumption, I don't know, within think there's a mixture of what and how in looking at fortes right now. So the one with R09 on the top. Morgan and I were talking. What I think is interesting about this is there are 6 core values. I don't know that I would agree that the way they've articulated a core value actually aligns. So I don't know that I am alert and engaged in during class is excellence. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. We're getting away from like the minutiae here. What I think is interesting is after this, there's a lot of what they're gonna do around moral development, culture, parent involvement, sweating the details. I would have liked to see how that ties into their core values. So I think they're like assuming that the reader and or this leader's staff is going to be able to put that together. But like if they're thinking about once a month having a morning open house with free coffee and pastries for parents and families, like why? That's an investment in a lot of resources. Like think about that. Like you're carving out 2 hours on your calendar every month. So first of all, I did cafecitos at my school in Brooklyn, even though parents and grandparents didn't know what a cafecito was. But it was core to what our schools were. We had a deep like parental involvement was a part of the core value, which got back to our core value of community. Okay, so the core value was community. The artifact or the articulation was like we were driving to having schools that were socially and economically diverse. And then that was one of the ways we did it. I think there's a lot of somewhat, somehow in here. I think for me, the bigger question is like, where is this all coming back together? So when you say to a teacher, and I think Ben did a lot of this yesterday, like, you're gonna lead cafecitos. You're gonna plan them, you're gonna like send out the email blast, you're gonna do the robocall, you're gonna be the one picking up coffees and all this. They're gonna be like, why? Why? So it's not like you're doing cafecitos, it is like, we desperately need and want our parents here every month to check in, because that aligns with our core value of community. One way we're doing that is this, and you're gonna be the one. You know, like, I think that is where this leader did not have a workshop like Ben's yesterday. And again, Ben was very clear. That is one theory of action around how to go from mission to core value to picture to socialize, like all these things, right? It's not the only way, but it's one way. I think that your community, students, parents, and staff, the values is what's gonna resonate with them. And in the enormous task of turnaround, like bringing it back to that is what's gonna keep everyone like inspired and driving towards whatever it is. And that would be my feedback to this guy. Like, all this is great, and I think who wouldn't want all these things, but like, why are you doing it?
But it
Like,
said family involvement, and they wanted to get the parents to be engaged, and they wanted to, it's like a whole section right before then that talks about how they want their families to work together and to be able to trust the school and to trust where they're going, and go beyond the traditional parent engagement to build confidence in them in their school. So then it kind of went into that, so I thought that was a part of that.
I think it is. Again, I would say why. And if the why is in service, team, resilience, integrity, voice, or excellence, then I'd say you're missing a core value, or you are not articulating your core value and like the tenets of it in a way that I can like go from point A to point B. So again, I think, and he does say this explicitly on page 3, that once students, and let's just assume all stakeholders, internalize the 6 core values, they will then adopt a more complex set of core values that include, like, this is a lot. Like 6 plus 3 for an 8th grade, like 6 plus 3 for anyone is a lot. Like, listen, like, how does advocacy, how is that different than voice? Like, that would be my first question. I don't know that it is, and I don't know that, again, like, this isn't necessarily the fine point here, but I would say, like, that's what confused me about this more than there are core values. I don't know if the crosswalk makes sense. And more importantly, having talked to folks that wrote this, and so a little insider baseball, like if you truly think that like this sense of community through parent involvement and through all these ways you're doing it, it's gotta either relate back to this or you just articulated a different core value, which is community. And then I would say, so you talked about community for parents, what about your staff? Like, are you having a shout out every morning or every Friday or whatever? Are you doing email blasts? So like if community is a core value, here's some great artifacts that quite frankly I would encourage people to steal some of these. I don't know that we call them cafecitos in some of our schools because it doesn't align with the community. But great things to steal if it resonates. But I do think the bigger picture, like, so why am I doing this? And is this hitting in all the stakeholders that I need is the pushback that I would have given this group. And then he does mention, and I don't know if it's in here, I believe there's some part where they talk about like the, like it's not Harambe, but essentially like a Harambe type like student meeting, yeah. So again, that to me is an artifact of a core value that you're not really articulating here, which is community. Like that's, and this was the feedback that this organization got, like you are actually like just trying to create like an ecosystem, which is awesome. And maybe you can do it. I mean, Harlem's Children's Zone, like talk about like their entire organization, which now like a national pillars around this idea that like we put up a wall around us and we provide everything within it. From the moment the child is born to the day they have their next kid, you know, their own child. But like that to me, especially with yesterday's session being so fresh in my mind, like I think this could be a lot cleaner. I think like this can be narrowed down and can be articulated in a much better way that is going to serve this school leader better when his teachers come on August 1 or whatever the date is. And when like you're asking people to do certain things. Like I think that's the missing piece here. There is an assumption again, this is a new school, this person is in a formal incubation program where like they're getting a lot of this in real time as they're working towards their launch. So everything isn't encapsulated necessarily on this paper. But I do think for me, a lot of the artifacts here are great and, you know, theft worthy. I don't know that the top two stages that we talked about yesterday is really great in this one.
So I want to get y'all's input, but just I think feeding off of what Mark just said, I want to run through kind of my approach to thinking through this, and then I want to hear from y'all what your thoughts were. What I really liked about this Forte thing was the start, his vision, and just an ability to kind of clearly start with like, here's what it's going to feel like at my school, right? He did this neatly in a paragraph. He didn't do like 10 pages of it, but just kind of like, here's generally what it's going to feel like. Again, I think the crosswalk could get tighter, so we'll talk about that in a second. But where I would start with thinking about culture is defining that mission and then pulling out like, what does that look like to me day in and day out? What does it feel like for kids and teachers? Then the
started, and then the way my brain works, because like I feel like I get caught up in the micro, I actually went here. Like, I know I want my kids, blah, blah, blah. I know I want my staff, and these were like very micro things. I wanted to shake every kid's hand when they came off the bus. And when my parents got upset with me, the first thing they said were like, I don't want you shaking my kid's hand because of germs. And I was like, we're gonna shake hands, but now I'll have a bottle of Pura. And like everyone will get disinfected before or after. With my OCD, that worked out just fine. But like, this is, again, my thought process. I always go to here, because like that's the way my brain works, because I know what I want my school to look like. Like, I know on a micro level, like when I walk into a classroom, what I want to see. And then for me, I go, how do I take all these little things and bucket them into the core values that eventually like I can articulate for my stakeholders. But that's just, again, that's just the way my brain works. I think Ben talked about this yesterday when he went up to Mississippi, locked himself in a hotel. He went from here to here. And then like he figured out all the artifacts and how he wanted to do it. Like, that's just not the way my brain works. And I think everyone here is gonna do it differently. But if it's logical for you to be able to step back and be like, I really want every one of my parents to engage with my staff on a weekly basis in this manner, whether it's text, newsletter, email, phone call, you're actually starting here, and then you gotta tie like, okay, so what does that really mean? Is it community? Is it communication? Is it collaboration? Like, it's gonna fall into one of these things. But I don't want, as we're looking through all of these things, they all read in this way, because that's the way that authorizers, that's the way that, even if you look at our playbook, like that's the way naturally I think we always bucket the end result. But I want everyone to feel comfortable, like if this is where you are right now, like in thinking about these things, like that is a great place to start, because you will eventually like find a way to bucket them and put them all together so that, again, when you're investing in these stakeholders, they all drive to something. And on the flip side, if you know what these are and you're struggling with what that means on a micro level, there's some examples. And there's also other people in the room that, like, as we go through the summer, we're gonna be talking about that. So I know I want teamwork. Like, what does that really mean? Like, I want a safe environment where everyone is working. Okay, so how do you actually do that? Do you want to have a staff meeting every morning where it's just about shout outs and everyone leaves feeling really good? Is it some other artifact, ritual, procedure, system? But I do want everyone to feel comfortable. Like, wherever you start, that's great. Like, it's totally up to you. And it's really how your brain works and through your experiences and how you kind of problem solve a really big task at hand, which is like re-envisioning your school.
What I would, so two things I would add, and I totally agree, and I appreciate that there are different approaches to doing all this, right? And it is, again, getting back to the start of this, like, what works for you and what do you need as a school leader to be successful day document that you can create to help guide you here, and I think we get into this a little bit more in the academic section, because people think of this more on an academic side, but I think you can think of it from a culture side, is thinking about your calendar, right? And so thinking through, like, daily, what are rituals that happen to reinforce this, weekly, monthly, right? You know this, but so that you really pull out, okay, like in summer PE, like what am I going to do to teach my core values, to norm my staff to what excellence looks like in each core value, to norm them to how this is going to get implemented on a day-to-day basis in the classroom, and then how am I going to check for that daily and weekly and reinforce it and support them doing that daily.
And real quick, I think the other thing that's important to say, and I think Ben hit on this yesterday, but like if you can't think of these, it's not core. Like if you can't think of like something on a, you know, again, this artifact level, we'll just call it the artifact level, like it's not core to you. And I think that's important because there are things that everyone puts in a charter application that I'm like, how are you gonna do it? Like you're putting in because you're supposed to put something about data-driven instruction. Eventually you will hire a third party, ANET, somebody's husband happens to work for, and they'll do it for you. But it's actually not core to you because you can't even articulate like what this means. You can't even give me like one example of like how you're gonna do a data analysis and reteaching cycle at your school. So like it's not core to you. It's something that you will eventually incorporate. But like if you can't think of these things, like I would encourage you just to step back and be like, why am I thinking like I need to put something about this on here? Like if the thought of like a parent meeting every month is like dreadful to you, I hope it's not. But really, like maybe that isn't what's core in this year of a turnaround at the school that you're at, you know? And I mean, I think Chapelside's a good example. Like, so Chapelside is in a really rough community where there's been a lot of violence lately and a lot of shooting. Tim and Tanya have had to like change end time on a sporadic basis so kids can get home safely, like kids can't walk, all this stuff. Like, is bringing parents into your school at night core versus like ensuring that kids are safe from the moment they walk into your fence? Like, some of this is a tiering and a priority. But if like, I do think like, don't feel like, if you can't think of things that you're excited and that like make you like want August 1st to get here sooner, it's probably not core, and that is fine.
And
That's totally fine.
the complement to that too is if there is stuff that you're excited about but you don't know how to implement yet, like that's where a thought catcher is really useful. And like I know like Markovitz's system for that constantly was to have like a certain subject line that he would email to himself, like read in March or something, because he would have his own personal retreat in March for planning for the next school year. Just like, I want to figure out how to do interim data. Like maybe it would just be that, right? Like, and so there is going to be stuff that like, this is a cool
or just what's in there repurposed in a way that is more consumable for certain stakeholders. I think some school leaders might feel very comfortable giving this to their staffs or giving sections of it to their staff. Ultimately, this is something that is going to be deeply personal for a school leader that I don't know would ever really be made public besides school leader, me, Maggie, Emily, coaches, and really using this as a guiding tool. I think that there are going to be pieces that you are going to be so proud of, and like, again, they are just so core to what you want to do that you're gonna convey that in a way that is appropriate.
So
But like
kind of
printing
our,
this,
our Bible, and then we're gonna
I
throw
use
out
Playbook instead of
scriptures
Bible to try and be
to
like,
our
again, we're not
teachers.
supposed to, yes,
So
but
we're
exactly.
not throwing the whole book to them. We're
No.
throwing little segments of it.
But and I would think of those as like appendices, right? Because this is like, I think in like nerd language, right? But like a structure that you're going to have to reinforce your core values and making some assumptions about y'all. But you will probably all have some kind of like PD agenda and PD calendar, and you will have a plan for when that is going to happen and how it will reinforce core values, and then probably also how it will help with the academics, hopefully, at your schools, right? And so that PD plan may be something that you share at the outset. So I think there will be kind of sub-documents, supporting documents as a part of this that you will, as you're building your playbook, it will make you realize, oh, like, I need a student discipline code. That will probably be shared school-wide and with parents and families, and that will be used, though, to reinforce these things. So all of these, again, like, thinking about what you need as a school leader to be successful, this is going to be a guiding document that's going to refer back to a lot of other component parts. Yeah, you don't have to share your playbook with, with your kids, if it contains.
But I will say,
We're detailing it to make our kids feel comfortable. Like when you put the staff and kids on there, there's just, for our sake, how we're gonna get our staff to understand it, how we're gonna get our kids to understand it. Yes. Got it.
yeah. And I think, so not directly answering your question, but I think a good way of articulating it is, if somebody were to read someone that cared about like education, not like someone that had no idea, was someone in California was to read your playbook, they should be able to envision your school when it's firing on all cylinders. And again, I think like, to me, that is who you're writing it for, not necessarily writing it for one of your actual kids or one of your actual teachers. Like, this is, again, like the guide to where you're going. And like teachers that sometimes will need much more micro than in here. Because like, again, there's gonna be PD and there's gonna be, agendas with outcomes and this and that, but like that day is gonna be much more micro than what is gonna be in here, So I do really think, if I was to think about like who am I writing it for, it's for someone that will never be able to go to your school. But by reading this, we'll be able to experience like a day in the life.
I would say also, what I can say from an operator's perspective is like, when we have people visit our school and see, like when someone comes through your halls like 2 years from now and sees something really exceptional and they're like, how do you do this? How do you have all of the kids skipping down the hallway holding hands and eating cotton candy? Like, how is that possible? Like, this is what you refer back to and say, like, well, here's part of our cultural plan that we have built, and here's how we did this from day one, and here's the script for student orientation when we start talking about cotton candy and holding hands, and here's the part of summer PD where we teach that to teachers. So it's what you kind of refer back to is how you guys are.
Do you have something in mind?
Well, I don't know, I might be swaying off course here, but some of Carlicia's questions, made me think, of, yes, this is deeply intimate. We're creating this for ourselves as a way of casting it, to impact hundreds of people, okay? But we still have board-approved handbooks and manuals and things that have to go out.
communication, which drives policies, handbooks, all those things, and there's like seamless, we know we have to absorb some things that have already existed. Now, I will say, I highly doubt that any handbook policy we have is wildly out of line with ultimately where you want to go. If anything, you're probably going to have more detail that like provides a better plan for your teachers to address student need than what is in a handbook. And like eventually that crosswalk happens. But I think we also can understand like handbooks come into play when there is an issue about students being expelled or being suspended or whatever the case may be. And first and foremost, I think that's a little bit of a margin thing that we shouldn't necessarily be making decisions in margins. It's about, you know, the bulk. But I mean, I think we need to own some of this, and this goes back to what Alyssa brought up earlier about goals from sponsor or CAP plans, right? All those things. Like, this isn't happening in isolation. It's another reason why we're doing today, and then we have time to step back, because there is a lot of like putting all these pieces together in a way that really works. I also do think that some of this and some of that, it is about process, not just the end point. So like going through this and really figuring out whether you start at artifacts and work your way up, or whether you start here and work your way down, like that is a leadership muscle that will serve you throughout your entire tenure as a leader, whether it is at a school level, if you change into whatever it is, like that is how transformative leaders lead through challenges that lie ahead of them, right? So like a part of this, and I think we talked about this a little bit yesterday before Ben started, when we think about our summers, accomplishing a couple of things. One, it's straight like capacity, PD, you know, expanding ourselves. Some of it is this, and some of it is just like modeling how leaders will lead through the challenges that we don't even know what they are yet, right? So I think this is one example. More concrete would be as we think about like the coaching all of our principals will be getting. That is an explicit way to model firsthand what we hope you all will make your own when you're working with your teachers. And I think this is something, again, detailed process, doesn't matter where you're starting, doesn't matter how your arrows go around, but like this is what leaders do as they think about crafting where they want to go and how they're going to get there. In the same way, I would say, if you realize on August 31st, like your lunch is a shit show, I would use this to figure out how I fix it. And I recall a staff meeting on September 1, like we are throwing all of this out because like this is what's core to me when I think about my kids going to lunch. I want them silent for 30 minutes, or I want them to be able to talk and engage and develop social skills. And this is how we're going to do it. So it's like, this is very big picture. The playbook is very big. Yes, it's drilling down. But like this process and this way that leaders think through, all bringing it back to what is core to you, is going to serve us all with every challenge that comes up, you know? And I think a good example, not to harp on Chapel side, but I will, like, if your school community has the same challenges as next year, like the fact that dismissal time might have to stagger at random days or months, like that is becoming an artifact that has to drive one of your core values that your teachers need to understand, that like there is no consistency at our school for the sake of our kids. Like some teachers want a nice box to work in that doesn't always exist. So if like ensuring that your school is a safe haven for kids and that they're gonna get from their door and back home safely, like for you that might mean one of your core values is flexibility or adaptiveness or whatever, however you would bucket it.
Or switching bus times with Broadway.
Exactly. But really, I mean, I think that those are the things that, like, this is a process that's going to serve you in all these challenges that you face. And I think our bus side is going to be standard across the board next year.
Well, we're the later school, they're the early.
Yeah, there's not going to be no
We're all the
later
same
school.
next year.
Yeah.
We're all the same time.
Yeah, I think we're all pretty, but don't quote me, like, we got all this, like, you lied.
That's another good thing.
What's that?
That's another good
Yes, it
thing.
is.
We're thinking, okay, don't hold me to it.
Sorry.
No. But anyway, I want to get back up. So like, I really do think like a part of this exercise, which again, I've said this many times, like this is an academic exercise. not just about the end result. I think the end result is gonna be wildly helpful for you, both with all your stakeholders and just how you think about your school. But I also do think like this produces a way of problem solving that whichever way you use it or how you use it or how you adapt to you is gonna serve you with all these challenges that come up.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, this helps me. I kind of do this outside with everything, break it all the way down to the micromanaging piece. But we have so many ideas all the time. And we're always like, oh yeah, this is a great idea. And then it never gets, to the bare, so it never ends up coming out the way that we really wanted it to. And I think this will really help with the vision and with everyone else being able to see the vision and being really, really clear about it. So,
And I think building on that, like there are great ideas and then there's like great ideas for right now. And like some of it might be like, this is a great idea, but like we are so far from being able to do this, like we will eventually get there. And this might be something I need to remind myself to revisit in December or next July or whatever the case is. But I do think like and again, I feel like, you kind of said like starting with the micro level. So again, you're starting here. And if it can't be tied up to what you and Tim really think is core, then it's like, okay, like we're gonna pause on it. Or like, I know this idea is like key. I gotta figure out how that becomes a core value. Because if that is key, like there's no way it's like a standalone thing that only happens in like one little moment in time. It speaks to a bigger belief that you have, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh well, this relates to it too. If I'm gonna do a cafecito, like what about parents that can't come at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday? So now I gotta do one in the evening, and I'm gonna do one on Saturday. Some parents can't, like if that is what's really core, all of a sudden you realize like there's a lot of levels to it, and then you tie it back up to that core belief and then back up to vision.
I would also argue, however you get there, the more crystallized this stuff is for your staff and for your kids and for your parents at the outset of the school year, the more able you are to implement those new ideas effectively when they're tied to this, right? So like if you have all of this really clear, and then end of September, like lunch is a shit show, right? Like you can go back to this and say, hey guys, like our vision is for this beautiful, happy place, and like kids are fighting during lunch. That's not okay. We all agreed that that's not what we were going to, and we're going to implement some new system by way of the core values that we already have set. And it is, as Mark was talking about, like leadership, it is an ability to impact change by leadership quickly and effectively because you've got folks bought into this stuff.
And so again, using an example of that, when I was with East staff, one of them asked me about like, will I have to, was it eat lunch or eat breakfast?
Lunch.
Eat lunch with my kids next year. And I was like, what do I know? With their kids next year, like what are you talking about? I'm here to tell you your principal's leaving, and like everyone's crying and they're asking about lunch, like that's weird. But anyway, like the example I gave them was about my old school where my core value, one of them was about this like relationship piece. And it is impossible for teachers to form relationships when the first interaction is like a kid walking through the door after having a trauma on a bus. So I asked them for the first 2 weeks of school, you will eat with your kids because you will be able to start forming a relationship and leaving bus stuff at the bus and being able to counsel kids better before they walk upstairs. We were a multi-story, that you can't do if you're not there. And it wasn't about like the process, it was about like, this is the value and this is how we get there, and I just need you to understand like, it's only 2, and they eventually did that all year. So it was like, yeah, you guys don't need to do that anymore, and they were like, no, I'm gonna keep doing it, like my day is, and it's not that like there was this thing, this duty that they had to check off, it was about like, we're actually hitting the bar on one of our core values. We have formed relationships that we never formed, and unfortunately these kids never had at the school because it's been an F for 7 years or whatever it was. And then when I was a couple months later, now teachers have to wait with kids while they get picked up because we had a lot of parents that weren't coming on time. And it wasn't because I couldn't handle it, and it wasn't because, you know, we were there till X to whatever time. It was about like, here's an opportunity to deepen our relationship. You're here at school anyway, so now you're gonna sit here with them, and we're gonna try this for 2 weeks and see how it goes. But it wasn't about like the micro, what the activity was, or the change we were making activity. It was always brought back to like relationships at school. Our kids have never had an advocate. They have been underserved, and their parents have been underserved, for some of them by this building, for their entire life. And like we have to break that, and I think relationships is one way that we're gonna do it.
So I know this is overwhelming and it's not neat, and that's hard. I think what's hard is like, there is no real clear template for doing this well, even with charter applications that are incredibly prescriptive. I actually find that it's still really hard to bucket all of this stuff in the right way. Different folks approach it differently. I think it is the end outcome, like making sure that you have these things and that they speak to each other well, and you have a system for putting them into place and reinforcing them in your schools. I do want to speak really quickly because we didn't talk about this Carver example. I just want to make sure that when you do read it, a thing that you look for is, I actually think in some ways they did similar to what Forte did. They have some components of professional development that are very specific, you know, certain numbers of hours in a week that teachers are getting PD, but there's not a really clear why. And also when you get to this level of specificity, there's not really clear metrics for like, what does success look like here? And I think once you do start to drill down, like that's what I would push on too, is like, you know, even for cafecitos, for example, like for cultural programs that you're putting into place, how are we judging whether or not this is a success after we've implemented it? We know what core value it ties to, we know the intention behind doing it, but how are we judging whether or not it's success? So you know, are all of the efforts that you're putting into implementing this program reaping some rewards? I do want to close out on the culture section by hearing from y'all though in kind of what your core takeaways are as you're thinking about, I mean, the intention of leaving today is y'all leaving with your head swirling a little bit. And I'm sorry if that feels uncomfortable, but I'm wondering what is swirling in your head right now. What are core components that you know you want to have in your culture section? What are questions that you're wrestling with? Hit me with either like, I know hard and sure I want to put this thing in this section, or here's something that I've been wrestling with.
I have a question.
Yeah.
One of the things that we've tried to do is to provide our staff with a planning period, a common planning period, uninterrupted lunch. We'll manage the kids during lunch, we'll manage them during breakfast, we'll manage them if the buses don't show up on time. So, but that's affecting us to be able to perform some of these things. So we're trying to, we want to adhere to that. So I guess I'm struggling with, I really want to do that because I feel that it's very valuable that they have that, but we're getting a lot of overflow because of that.
Yeah, so I think I'll do the same as Mark here. Like the question back to you is the why. Like, why is it really important that teachers have that?
We have the why. We know the why.
Yeah.
The why is important. The why gives them opportunity to plan, to collaborate, to look at their performance data, to work, to talk about, even do some things with kids. So that all the why is there. It's a lot on us.
The
A lot.
implementation of it isn't working.
Yeah, a is, when do you just throw it out because it's, you can't.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's the thing, so it's going back to your outcomes and your core values, and like, is it so important to the outcomes? Is the artifact, the system, the structure, whatever, is it countering the outcomes and the core values that you wanna have, or is it achieving them?
Now it takes it down to the metrics, like is it working or is it
Yeah.
not working? If you have a bunch of
It works
unhappy
for,
teachers, then that's not gonna
it
work.
works on their side of
It
the,
works for the teacher.
yeah, it's, cause they get a lot,
Is the outcome, are they collaborating, are they doing things that you
Yeah.
just listen?
And
yeah,
are you seeing that in like academic outcomes?
yes,
Yes.
absolutely. But it's killing us on the other side. I know.
So I think these are like the tough choices though, that why you have this kind of structure is you have to make those trade-offs of figuring out like,
Yeah, so when you say, and I don't mean to get micro here, but I think this is a good like spur of the moment kind of learning. So when you say it's killing you, is it because of the stress of working, of like covering kids or covering lunch, whatever the case may be, or it is killing you because it's not allowing you to do other things that you think are critical to your job? And if it's the latter, then I would actually say your core value around teacher development is contingent upon them having time to collaborate and push and pull each other. So they are still doing what you have identified as a core value for your school, which is growth and development, but you're not in the room leading it. And your value in that is by affording them the time to be able to do it. I think the pushback would be like, so what the heck are they doing? Like, is it really moving the needle? Is it? And that's a whole progress monitoring piece. But I would want you to change your mindset and your kind of frame of reference. Like, just because you're not in the room doesn't mean that you're not fulfilling that what you've identified as a core component. I would say the same thing around coaching. Like, we all will have a plan to ensure that all teachers get really robust weekly coaching. It is not going to be on the shoulders of just the school leader. That is impossible. So some of it is like your role is figuring out how you make it work schedule-wise. But the fact that you're not doing it doesn't mean it's not happening. It doesn't mean that you're dropping the ball. If your answer was the former, like I'm getting gray hairs because, then it's like, okay, let's problem solve like how you can have productive time with 3 classes of kids in the category, or whatever the case may be. Then it's like a different challenge that you're trying to lead through. But I would say, like, to anyone, like, if that is a core component, and we're gonna, and we're just spitballing here, but the core value is something about growth or development. And if you truly think that one of the artifact system structures is collaborative planning time, you're doing it, even though you're not the one that's in the room.
That makes sense, I understand. That-
And then I would say, if you don't feel like that artifact is getting to the end, then you figure out how to tweak. But I mean, you're doing it. Just because it's not you physically doing it, it is happening. But there always needs to be metrics and progress and all those stuff, and all those things, so.
That makes sense. Thank you.